Hey, happy travelers, vacation travel hacks here talking about cruising. We're talking about one of the busiest cruise ports. It used to be the busiest. Now, allegedly, the Port Canaveral is the busiest. Now, we're talking about just 5 tips to consider when cruising out of the Port of Miami. Maybe it's your first time in a long time. Maybe it's your first time. And heck, maybe you just want to hear some tips. So let's hop into it. Tip number one, maybe in the past, maybe if you're, we'll call it pre-COVID, we call it PC. You've heard of, before BC, before is it before Christ? Well, now we got PC, but before COVID, you could, pre-COVID, you could probably get away with flying in the day of. And heck, you know what? If you're a gambler, maybe you like going on the casinos of the cruise ships, kind of rolling the dice, playing some craps. But it seems like now more than ever, flights are delayed, flights are getting canceled, whether it's due to the airlines, due to the weather, due to your strikes, due to any number of reasons. Heck, when we just came back from Miami in November, no, spring, April, a few months ago, the Fort Lauderdale got flooded the day after we left. So we wouldn't. So anyway, long story short, fly at least. It says at least the day before. You can roll the dice. If you fly in the day of, the cruise lines do offer transportation, which is nice. But if you fly in the day before, just make your way back to the airport and they'll take you. You can use this transportation. Or we'll talk a little bit more about transportation a little later. And then consider flights when you're disembarking. Consider flights after 1 p.m. A lot of people ask, "Hey, can I catch a? We pull into port at 8 a.m. Can I catch a flight at 10 a.m.?" Woo! Can you imagine if there's a little hiccup in the cruise port, you're just slightly delayed, 10 a.m. Noon could oh, man, I get a little anxious. I would consider flights after 1 p.m. to be safe. And we had a flight at 3 p.m. out of Fort Lauderdale, and we had a couple hours to wait. And it's a lot better to have a couple hours to wait than to miss your flight and then to have to deal with all the headaches. So this is a rule of thumb, and maybe I don't know that's I just can't fathom flying any earlier than one. And if you do have a later flight, there's post cruise excursions that most cruise ships offer. For example, in Miami, got the top 10 of Miami. So they drive you around, they pack your luggage onto the van, drive you around, show you top 10, then drop you off at the airport. Then you got the South Beach experience. Then you can hang out with some gators up here. So, a little bit of fun. So if you book a little later flight, you can have some fun with that also. Number two, flying in the day before in the Port of Miami, it gives you some options in terms of hotel prices and airfare prices. And this is just a Google flight here, where if you fly into Fort Lauderdale, you got 400 options. Fly into Miami. Oh, and these dates, by the way, these are around Thanksgiving because my next cruise out of the Port of Miami will be Thanksgiving of next year. So I'm scouting, just kind of seeing what to expect. What's a good deal, what's not a good deal. And so the cool thing about Miami is they have a couple airports servicing it. So I'll keep that in mind. And that's tip number two. Tip number three, Miami has a lot of events. This could impact your transit time, more impactful on the way to the cruise ship. And so I suppose certainly impactful on the way back to the airport too. Just be aware, if you're looking at a cruise, check the dates. Formula One could be in town, Miami football games, although Hard Rock Stadium is kind of away from downtown. It's not in downtown, but there could be increased volume. There's tennis matches in and around parades, construction, cruise ships, marathons, could be any number of things. Just double check, because if it's downtown, the streets could be closed. Several streets could be closed. And what does that do? Could increase volume onto the main street. For us to get from Fort Lauderdale to the Port of Miami, it was 45 minutes. So I just estimate an hour with normal traffic, and that was weekend. And most of that, by the way, was at the cruise terminal. Same thing, 45 minutes to the airport. It says 30. Actually, I think you could do it in 25 with lean traffic. So same sort of situation there. Just be aware of the events. That's tip 3. Tip number 4, lots of options. If you're Fort Lauderdale, there's so many private options. Obviously, you got taxi and Uber, so many limo services to consider, highly reviewed. You can use TripAdvisor, Google. There's no wrong way to get there. From Fort Lauderdale, we used SAS, and most of the hotels there pick you up at the hotel. You could be the first stop, you could be the last stop, but they drive their little bus around until the bus is full, and they call you and say, hey, we'll be there in about 15-20 minutes, which was about 30 minutes earlier than what we expected. So we weren't super ready yet, but just be flexible there with that. Then there's cruise ship transportation. So you go to fly into the hotel, and then the next day you take transportation back to the airport. Most hotel shuttles offer free transportation to and from the airport. Then you can, like I showed on this previous slide here, you can take the transportation from the airport back to the cruise ship. And then there's just lots of hotels offer shuttle services to and from. Now, in my experience, it wasn't free. I think they wanted $35 to $55 a person to get from the hotel. Maybe your hotel will be free, but just call and ask. If you see something that says, "Hey, offers service to the cruise port," just call and ask. See, hey, when does it leave? How do we reserve? I called around many of the hotels, lots of Marriotts, lots of Hiltons, and they knew a guy. So anyway, they offer it, and just use it if you can. Tip number 5. This one I actually didn't know until we were leaving. So if you were driving to the cruise port, or you have somebody picking you up, or you're having an Uber and a Lyft pick you up, it is possible, and it happened to us, that you could be leaving out of, say, Terminal D. Right there, Terminal D. Here you got a cruise ship, and then when you arrive, you could be at Terminal B, for example. It happened, and I was a lot of people were impacted because they parked their car at the car garage at the other one, and the cruise folks, Carnival, arranged transportation like a shuttle, or you could walk, but it would be important then to know that, just remember where you parked, and you may have, maybe not, you may have to head on down there. Certainly impactful for us because we had to tell the SAS person where we were, and so it just seems like a good tip to mention here. Some bonus tips. Port of Miami. When we left, there was cruise ships at seemingly every one of these terminals, and they're the big ones. These weren't like some of the smaller ones, like out of Tampa or Jacksonville that sometimes we sail out of, or Mobile. I mean, they were all like the mega ships, and what that did was all of them, all the king's horses, all the king's men were going in, and then picking up, going out, and it worked, but man, it was so busy. It was the busiest. So Saturday and Sunday, if that's when your cruise, probably seems like most of them do. Expect volume. Just factor that in. You're not going to be beating anybody. And then airport check-in also influenced. When we were going up to Fort Lauderdale, you got Port Everglades up there, and again, some of the bigger cruise ships, Princess, some of the larger Royal Caribbean ships, etc. There's many. Port Everglades is also not a slow port. So the airport check-in, whether it was the airlines dropping off the bags, security, there was volumes there. Another tip: just don't forget cash for the porters. I don't like to, I'm not saying don't tip them, and if you don't tip them, you won't get your bag. But it is customary to tip them. They work for tips, and you just bring cash. Good. It's a bonus tip. And then consider just the theme, team. The theme here for these tips is certainly that second to last tip. Bonus tip there is consider extra time. Just err on the side of extra time. You're on vacation. Once you're on the ship, it's stress-free, but you don't want to be stressing out after, wondering if you're going to miss out, like that last day, like, hey, I'm going to, catch my flight. Did I do the right thing? And wondering, I'm that person. Maybe you just don't care, or you're rushing around trying to get on the ship, and that can impact the crowd you're with. And so just factor in extra time. Worst case scenario, you're at the airport, you get extra time for a latte and a beverage. But more importantly, be in the moment, have the most fun. These are the tips that not only were useful for me when I was there in April, will continue to be useful for me when I make my return trip here in a few months' time. So I hope you travel safe. And if you have other tips that you think the people going to the Port of Miami need to know, feel free to drop them in the comments. Or maybe there's tips you'd like to hear about that I didn't cover. Like, hey, do you have the tip about this? And here at Vacation Travel Hacks, we are not travel agents. We're just, and by we, I mean me. There's no, it's just, it's just me. I am Vacation Travel Hacks. We like to provide tips. I like to provide tips, and I'm not a travel agent. I can't book travel for you. I book travel for me and my family. So anyway, hope you have fun, and I'll see you in the next video.